Have you ever seen the World Slap Fighting Championships? You heard me. Slap fighting. Are we really calling this a combat sport? When you think of combat sports, you probably think of boxing, purely because it's the most famous of the combat sports. For the average Joe, though, it's also what most people think of when they think of a fight. Two people punching each other. But that's just boxing. There's more to combat sports than punching. Kickboxing, karate, and taekwondo are definitely combat sports. They all have different rule sets, but basically, they take all of the punching that boxing has to offer, and they throw in kicks for good measure. Then there's Muay Thai, which does everything all of those do and then adds knees and elbows, which are much harder than fists and feet. And the results are as you'd expect. And just for fun, what's harder than the bones in your knees and elbows? The bone in your head, which is one reason why Letway includes headbutting in its striking arsenal. But the fact is, combat sports don't even have to involve striking. Wrestling is absolutely a combat sport. It's been a combat sport for over 15,000 years, and there are no punches or kicks or anything like that allowed in wrestling. It's just one-on-one, physical competition where someone is going to out-grapple the other. It isn't that different to judo, but judo includes more throwing, and it adds a few submissions as ways of winning. Still no striking, though. Brazilian jiu-jitsu is the next step in judo's evolution, as it focuses less on the takedowns and throwing and more on the submissions. Still no striking, and anyone who knows anything about combat knows that jiu-jitsu is easily one of the most effective combat sports in town. But all the combat sports now bow to the one called mixed martial arts, which, as you can tell by the title, is a mixture of all the martial arts, otherwise known as combat sports. The reason why MMA is the king of combat is that it puts competitors from all of the various disciplines against one another to see what techniques from what disciplines of combat work best. And as it turns out, mixing the best bits of every discipline is what wins out every time. So then, where does slap fighting come into the mixed martial arts picture? To be honest, it sort of doesn't. Some of you might be screaming, what about Nate Diaz and the Stockton slap? Some of you might recall the way Muhammad Ali used to slap his opponents, in between hitting them with every other punch in the book. And you'd be right, they did use a form of slapping in their fights. But was it this? No, it was not. But then again, does that matter? Let's go back to boxing. At its simplest, boxing is punching people. If you remove everything from MMA except for punching and footwork, then you've got boxing. And boxing is most definitely a combat sport. It's an interesting slope. If you can strip aspects of MMA away to create different combat sports like boxing, because it allows for a bunch of other weird and wonderful competitions to be classified as combat. For example, shin kicking.
It actually takes a great tolerance of pain, but you need to be agile and you need to be fit. In theory, it sounds like it's just a rough, but it's not. It's quite skillful.
The rules are pretty simple. Stuff some hay down your trousers, hold onto your opponent's shoulders, and then kick each other in the shins until one of you can't take it anymore. Honestly, it's not that far removed from boxing.
The straw is basically to act as a padding as a safety against the shins. I mean, they've always done the straw down the trousers. I mean, it's a way of also so you don't get too bad of cuts as well, because you can get like a Grant's cut as well. At the moment, because of the padding there, you'll get more bruising and not hopefully breaks or anything. But you may get a few cuts, but if you didn't have the cuts there, within one strike on the leg, the game, it would be over. So it's just to hopefully keep it going, like a boxer's glove.
He's got an interesting point about the hay acting like a boxer's glove. If we look at bare-knuckle boxing, which is most definitely a combat sport, we immediately see that it's an extremely bloody competition. The number one reason for this is because bone-on-bone punching causes cuts. And it's weird to say it, but cuts can stop fights prematurely. What also can stop a fight prematurely is a broken bone. And as we mentioned earlier, heads are harder than hands, so a lot of hands break. That's why bare knuckle boxing was replaced by the gloved variety. But if we swap boxing's fists, gloves, mouthguards, and above-the-belt targeting for feet, boots, high and below-the-knees targeting, then boom, shin kicking is as much a combat sport as boxing. Slap fighting, then, just removes the gloves and footwork. The argument makes a sort of logical sense. But as with all slippery slopes, the slide has to end somewhere, and it's usually in a disgusting heap. For combat, that heap is likely to be somewhere around championship toe wrestling. If MMA is pure combat and you can strip away techniques to create other combat sports like boxing and wrestling, then if you strip away enough, apparently, you get two people locking their toes together in a best-of-3 battle of wits and strength. Apparently.
You've got to have a big toe. I know that sounds daft, but, you know, bigger the toe, plenty of muscle in your leg. Overall, really, it's just having that power to get the opponent and down, and psychological battles as well.
And if toe wrestling is a combat sport, then so is thumb wrestling, isn't it? I mean, the rules make it sound a lot like combat.
Basically, the rules of thumb wrestling are we have best-of-3 rounds. There are 60-second rounds. To start the match off, we have a professional thumb ring where people put their thumbs and get a good grip inside the ring, and then they'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, I declare a thumb war.
I know it sounds ridiculous. It's clearly a kid's game for the schoolyard, but let's give him time to finish.
From there on, you've got 60 seconds to pin your opponent for as long as it takes to say 1, 2, 3, 4, I win the thumb war. As long as your elbows are down whilst you do that and you say those words clearly and audibly, then you will win that round. It's best-of-3 rounds. It's a round-robin tournament all the way to the final.
So let's get this straight. The World Thumb Wrestling Championships are almost exactly the same as a wrestling tournament, except fighters can only use their thumbs to grapple, and matches are shorter. Just like boxing is the same as MMA, except combatants are limited to only using their fists, and matches are shorter, right? Then clearly we should embrace slap fighting as a combat sport worthy of standing alongside boxing and wrestling and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai. Look, to be honest, I'm not even sure I convinced myself. Thanks for watching, and remember, if you want more fight sports in your life, just hit the subscribe button.